Africa has gold, oil, cocoa, lithium, diamonds, and the youngest, most vibrant workforce in the world. So tell me, why does a continent so rich in resources still import chocolate, fuel, clothes, electronics, and even something as simple as toothpicks? It's a paradox that has confused many. But today, we're going to expose the real reason Africa imports finished goods, and I promise you, it has nothing to do with laziness. This is the untold economic truth. Before we dive in, if you want to understand the real stories behind African economics, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives just like this one. Let's start with the facts. Africa is a treasure chest of raw materials. Ghana and Ivory Coast alone produce over 60% of the world's cocoa. Countries like Nigeria, Angola, and Libya are swimming in crude oil. We have gold in Ghana and South Africa, and the Democratic Republic of Congo holds the key to the future of technology with its massive reserves of lithium and cobalt. And let's not forget cotton, with Burkina Faso, Mali, and Benin being major producers. Yet, here's the puzzle: Africa imports chocolate from Switzerland and Belgium. We import refined petrol even though the crude oil came from our own soil. We buy clothes from Asia and Europe that are often made from the very cotton we exported. It just doesn't make sense, right? So, what really went wrong? To find the answer, we have to travel back in time. The economic structure many African nations operate under today wasn't designed by them. During the colonial era, European powers like Britain, France, Belgium, and Portugal engineered Africa's economies for one primary purpose: to be a massive supplier of raw materials for their own factories. Processing and manufacturing were intentionally kept in Europe. The railways and ports you see, many were built with a single goal in mind: to efficiently move raw materials from the interior to the coast, onto ships, and straight to Europe. Think about it. Cocoa beans from Ghana are shipped to Switzerland, where giants like Nestle and Lindt turn them into expensive chocolate bars. Crude oil from Nigeria is sent to refineries in Europe, and the finished petrol is then sold back to Nigerians at a much higher price. This colonial model created a dependency that, unfortunately, didn't disappear after independence. The system was so deeply embedded that it continued to operate long after the colonial flags came down. It was designed for extraction, not for development. This leads us to the next massive hurdle: weak industrialization. To turn raw materials into finished products, you need factories. But building and running factories requires a few key things that many African nations have struggled to secure. First, you need stable and affordable electricity. In many places, power cuts are a daily reality, making it impossible to run machinery consistently. Second, you need access to affordable financing. Entrepreneurs with brilliant ideas often can't get the loans they need to build a factory or buy equipment because interest rates are too high or banks are unwilling to take the risk. Then there is the lack of modern factories and a workforce with the specific technical skills to operate them. For decades, Nigeria has battled to get its own oil refineries running at full capacity. South Africa stands out as one of the few African countries with a relatively strong and diversified industrial base, but it's more of an exception than the rule. We are seeing some positive changes, like Ethiopia's recent push to build massive textile manufacturing hubs, but for most of the continent, the industrial gap is huge. Without factories to process our own resources, the only option left is to import the finished goods from someone who does. But the story gets even more complicated. It's not just about a lack of factories. We also have to talk about trade policies and global pressure. In the 1980s and 90s, many African countries were in economic distress and turned to international institutions like the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank for help. The help came with strings attached in the form of policies known as Structural Adjustment Programs, or SAPs. These programs forced African governments to make drastic changes. They had to remove subsidies that supported local farmers and industries. They were told to open their borders to foreign goods with very low tariffs. The idea was to promote free trade, but the result was often catastrophic for local industries. They simply couldn't compete. Imagine a small Nigerian textile factory trying to compete with the flood of incredibly cheap textiles from Asia. The local factory, dealing with high energy costs and lack of infrastructure, stood no chance. Nigeria's once thriving textile industry in places like Kaduna and Kano collapsed. In Ghana, the local poultry industry was decimated by cheap, frozen chicken imported from Europe. These policies, meant to help, ended up pulling the rug out from under Africa's budding industries. Now, let's talk about where the real money is made. It's all about value addition. This is the process of turning a raw material into a finished product. And right now, almost all of that value addition happens outside of Africa. Let me give you a clear example with cocoa. A ton of raw cocoa beans might sell for around $2,500 on the global market. On top of all this, we have major infrastructure and logistics challenges. Let's say you're a bold entrepreneur who manages to build a factory. You still have to deal with poor roads that make it difficult and expensive to transport goods. The cost of moving a container from one African country to another can sometimes be higher than shipping it all the way from China. Add unreliable power supply and inefficient ports to the mix, and the cost of doing business becomes incredibly high. In many cases, it is sadly cheaper and easier for a business in Lagos or Accra to simply import a finished product than to try and produce it locally. The system itself makes importing the path of least resistance. So, with all these challenges, is there any hope? Is Africa doomed to repeat this cycle forever? The answer is a clear no. The story is beginning to change, slowly but surely. There is a growing awareness across the continent that this has to stop. We're seeing some powerful and positive developments. The African Continental Free Trade Area, or AfTA, is a game changer. It aims to create the world's largest free trade area, making it easier for African countries to trade with each other, creating a massive market that can support local industries. We're also seeing major infrastructure projects. The massive Dangote refinery in Nigeria, for example, is set to finally end the country's reliance on imported fuel. Ethiopia's industrial parks are creating thousands of jobs and positioning the country as a new manufacturing hub. Rwanda has championed a Made in Africa policy to boost local production. And in Ghana, the One District, One Factory initiative is trying to spread industrialization across the country. These are not small steps. They are bold moves in the right direction. But we have to be realistic. The journey is still very, very long. So, to wrap it all up, Africa does not import finished goods because its people are incapable or lazy. It imports them because of a complex web of factors: the colonial history that designed its economy for extraction, policy choices often influenced by outside pressure, massive infrastructure gaps that make local production difficult, and a global economic system that keeps the most profitable part of the value chain outside the continent. The solution is clear: Africa must aggressively pursue industrialization, focus on adding value to its own raw materials, and strengthen trade within the continent. The power to change this narrative lies within Africa itself. If you believe in this vision for a self-reliant and prosperous Africa, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with everyone you know. Let's get this conversation going. Thanks for watching,